Welcome to another episode of the GBNO Show, the Get Better Not Older Show. I am Dr. Rob Jones. This is my awesome wife, Shannon, the dietitian.
Hi.
Hi. So, number 19, we are talking about not just number 19, episode 19. We're talking about a very important and really probably one of the most talked about things in the medical world right now, which is our tiny tenants, which you wrote in the title here, which I think is kind of cute, but it's the microbiome, okay? It's the good bacteria that is all over the body. So we're going to get into that, but first, why are you watching this? Between us, kind of older but pretty fit people, we have over 50 years of combined experience. I'm your outside in guy, and Shannon is the
inside out.
Yes. So we're going to help you move, feel, live better, again, from the outside in and the inside out. So again, trust us because we kind of know some stuff because we've been around the block. So anyways, microbiome and all things related to it that we can fit in a short period of time here. We could make this a 5-hour podcast and bore the hell out of everybody, but we're going to keep it to clinical tidbits that we think are the most important thing with relation to the microbiome. So why don't you go ahead and just describe what it is. Most people tend to know what it is because of the big push on probiotic supplementation and people learning about gut bacteria, good and bad. So go ahead and let's give Cliff Notes version on really kind of the highlights of what people need to know.
Okay. Am I allowed to pause first?
I don't know.
Well, aren't you going to say anything about our new digs?
Oh, yes. I kind of forgot about that. So we have a new GBNO symbol. Cool, right? Kind of professional.
I know. We're special.
I know.
And also, one of the big changes, which this is going to be very tough for you, we're going to try to really make these more 30-minute podcasts. Historically, we've run about an hour or so. And so that's going to be unique to these podcasts. We're going to try to keep them shorter.
Yeah.
So that people will actually listen to us.
Yeah. So let me translate that. Rob, shut up. Stop talking. Stay on point.
Dr. Rob, land the plane.
Okay, roll.
Okay. So we have referred a lot to the microbiome continuously in almost all of our podcasts, I would say. We've never really devoted one entire episode to it, but it could probably, as you say, be a 5-part series. We are really doing very high level today, but the short and long of it is that your microbiome are trillions of microbes, bacteria, viruses, etc., that live in your body, on your skin. Every single organ in your body has these microbes. And what really the biggest study came out in around 2018. It was an NIH study. And that's where we really started to realize it. They used to think that there was nothing but just brain matter in the brain. And now we know your brain has its own microbiome. So what is it? It's these good and bad bacteria that live and populate these areas. As a matter of fact, we have trillions. We are so full of bacteria. If you think about this, it could cover the surface area of a tennis court. And we have more bacteria than cells in our body. And that is hard for people to think. And people, typically associate bad with bacteria. This goes back to the days of Louis Pasteur. But honestly, it's a balance of good and bad. You need both of them. We have both of them, and it's that balance. And when it's out of balance, which we call dysbiosis, that is where we start to see health concerns.
Right. So we recently, people follow us because we set examples for people, but we recently changed toothpaste completely. What's the name of the branding? Is it Hello? Okay. Again, no affiliation with them, but that's what we use. And you change it up for many reasons. There's no chemicals in it. There's no fluoride, but there's research now coming out on how dysbiosis or improper bacterial formation of the good bacteria in your mouth can influence digestion, because digestion starts with salivary amylase in your mouth, and it can affect bad breath, tooth health, tooth decay, etc. So people who are brushing their teeth and then rinsing their mouth out with scope or whatever mouthwash they're using are destroying the microbiome and wondering maybe why their teeth are breaking down and they're getting bad breath.
And one thing you forgot, which we had an entire episode on, is why they may be hypertensive.
Oh, I forgot about that part.
Yes.
Why don't you reiterate?
Well, so basically, you need to be able to produce nitric oxide, and that starts in your mouth. And so what they have found is by using mouthwash and by using fluoride in toothpaste, it is wiping out the good bacteria in your mouth that is creating that nitric oxide, or the cycle of it's starting to create nitric oxide. And that is a major problem for people.
There you go. So starting in the mouth, now you go down into the gut, which most people, again, there's microbiome on your hands, there's, in your nose, ears, whatever, but mainly we're going to talk about the gut today. So gut meaning large intestine. So we don't want a high amount of microbiome in the small intestine because that gives you SIBO, right, which stands for what?
Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Right, which can cause problems.
Which definitely causes a problem. But we are going to start, so we've defined really kind of what microbiome is. Now let's just kind of talk about how it affects each area a little bit.
Okay, so you want to start with the gut?
Yeah, like digestion and metabolism. Obviously, that's the beginning. But, the interesting thing is it's all about real food again. It's what do these bacteria prefer is real food. And what are we giving our bacteria?
Crap.
Processed food.
Right.
Which is why we're having issues with, this is really kind of how it's evolved. We've known this for a really long time. Hippocrates said it all starts in your gut, right? Health starts in your gut. He's known this for, God, how many?
Thousands of years ago. Yeah.
So we just didn't listen. Now here we are, fast forward, and now they are correlating every disease to the bacteria that is in each organ, in each area. How we see it in our gut, how it manifests, well, there's that gut-brain axis, so that's a whole nother story. But specifically in our gut, there's this terminology or diagnosis that people get IBS, which is honestly a garbage diagnosis. It just means they don't know what's wrong with your gut.
Yeah, well, it stands for irritable bowel syndrome or IBD, irritable bowel disease. That's when you go into your doctor's office and they see the symptom and you go, oh man, my gut is always upset and my stools are off and I'm irregular and I'm constipated and then I have diarrhea, and they go, oh, you have just irritable bowel disease or irritable bowel IBS syndrome. Take this pill for it. Instead of going, well, let's look at your diet. Let's see if you're putting a bunch of artificial crap in your body, like aspartame, we know, or sucralose, which is, those fake sweeteners that are lab created, which create dysbiosis. They kill your gut bacteria. There's, multifactorial. We could do a whole separate series on this, but if you're not feeding it the right way, you're going to get some sort of situation, some sort of symptom that leads to a syndrome, if you will, or a disorder that's diagnosable. But again, how do you correct it? Clean, healthy food.
Right. And it used to be like, back when I was working in the hospital, an IBS chart was like this high for a patient, just because it's constant problems. Why? Well, because pretty much everything begins in the gut. And if you've got what they call a leaky gut, which is honestly a major issue that is causing this microbiome dysbiosis because of the food and our environment that we're subjecting it to.
Okay, I need to explain leaky gut really quick. Okay.
Yep.
So when you take in food, in the small intestine, the first part is called the duodenum, you have these little projections called microvilli, and that's where the food particles, when they're broken down, they're absorbed up in, then they meet the circulatory system, and then the nutrients goes into your blood, and then, it distributes to your cells and energy and vitamins, minerals, whatever. In between those microvilli, there's these little gaps, and what can happen is if your gut is really unhealthy, the mucosa is not slippery and smooth, it's inflamed, it's cracked. Think of chapped lips, okay? You're going to get these little cracks. Now the food starts going into your general system, not in the circulation, and your body goes, holy crap, that is something that is foreign. I need to attack that because I don't recognize it. And it's not like a virus that gets in and your body goes, oh, I recognize that cold virus. I'm going to attack it with this much immune system function. It's going to send a massive response. So then it kind of attacks that little food particle that's going into that leaky gut invader. And then all the offshoot, there's all this extra immune attack function. And it goes, oh, well, we don't know what to do now because there's only so much of that. Let's go attack the skin. Oh, now we have eczema, which means skin disorder of unknown origin. Or we have acne, or we have joint issues like rheumatoid arthritis and other
all of the anti-inflammatory and
exactly. So that's what leaky gut means.
Autoimmune diseases, truly. We could literally do an entire podcast on leaky gut. The takeaway on leaky gut is once your gut is compromised, those are called tight junctions. Once those tight junctions are compromised, it's not just a reaction at the site. It's a systemic reaction saying, oh my gosh, everybody, all systems go. We have an intruder and, everybody put full system in. And this is where we're getting these secondary diseases, autoimmune diseases, because of it's an immune response to leaky gut. So typically that leaky gut is where this really kind of this dysbiosis starts, is really like, oh, okay, we have got a disruption in good and bad guys. Okay. Then we just talked about the immune system regulation, what that causes if things are getting in. The other thing is mental health, and that's that whole gut-brain connection. They are now tying anxiety, depression, etc., to bacteria. We are seeing more and more and more of autoimmune disease and mental health disease. And why is this? You have to take a step back and go, well, what is happening? Like, why all of a sudden does everybody have an autoimmune disease? Why, I think we can talk about what happened in 2020 is probably a culprit to some of the mental health issues. However,
but prior to that, we were seeing a definite uptick for sure.
Really, what it comes down to is our food source
100%.
And the fact that we are no longer eating real food that is nourishing our bacteria so that they can rule the roost and do what they're supposed to do. They're starving because we're eating this processed crap, and it's like, hey, what's going on? We can't do, it's like almost like a tropical rainforest. You've got to, what would happen if there was no water ever again in a tropical rainforest? There's no way it can survive. So what do we do to feed this tropical rainforest and make sure it can do what it needs to do? We have to have real food, real fruits and vegetables, real legumes. Does everybody know what legumes are? Like beans and chickpeas and, right? Real plant foods. So that's kind of why we're seeing an uptick, plus the fact that we're spraying everything with glyphosate. So you are getting pesticide on everything that you're eating if you're not eating organic. And unfortunately, that is breaking down your gut barrier and causing issues. So we've got this major issue going on because our food system is causing the problem. And so now we have to take a step back and go, wow, well, we've drilled this all down to bacteria now. Now what do we do? So let's talk a little bit about what people can do to protect their microbiome.
Can I rewind for 1 second?
You can.
Yes, because I love to give real life examples. I had a patient years ago back in Kansas, and this was going back to 2010, 11, somewhere in there. He was a psychology professor, and he told me about studies that were being done then where they took depressed rats and they took non-depressed rats, and all they did was switch their microbiome. Meaning they pulled the poop out of the depressed rat, pulled the poop out of the non-depressed rat, injected them into the opposite one, and the symptoms completely reversed.
Yep.
Depressed became non-depressed, and non-depressed became depressed. And they didn't change behavior, or they didn't change environment, exposure, food, anything. It was just microbiome.
And this is like a real deal. It's
Yes.
called a fecal transplant. And honestly, it is a way that they are treating disease now, especially when you get a extreme case of dysbiosis, you can get a really, really bad bacteria called C. difficile. And in that situation, it's really hard to eradicate, and the fecal transplant is super helpful.
Yeah.
But just even for weight loss, same thing. In my realm of what I do, obese rats switch with a thin rat, and all of a sudden the thin rat becomes obese. And we've talked about so far digestion and metabolism, immune system, mental health, weight and metabolism. It used to be that the brain was thought of not having its own, but now they're starting to say, now they have found that there's actually a microbiome in the brain.
Well, you called it the gut-brain axis, right? So,
yeah, but it was back when medical school, I don't know if you ever learned this in school, but it was always thought that the brain was its own little tight system. It wasn't tied into, what would you call that? I always lose my words on that, but they used to call it something, but now they know actually your brain has its own microbiome.
Well, it's, again, it kind of controls everything, and it sounds redundant, but again, you can look at so many things, but if you want to get down to truly being healthy and truly solving problems, you can't not include this. Why don't you talk about your experience with some skin issues, not your personal skin issues, but patients you've dealt with rosacea, acne, and then what you did for them with the whole, the whole poop analysis.
Oh, great.
Shannon likes to play with poop.
Whew. Okay, we're going there. So, basically when I assess patients, and we are, most people obviously come to me for disease prevention or weight loss. And I want to look metabolically as far as what's going on. If we start going through a medical history and they're complaining about their thyroid or Hashimoto's, or they're complaining about eczema or skin, rashes that they don't know what's going on or whatever, then immediately my brain goes to, we need to see what's going on in your gut. Even recently, our own daughter called us and said, I'm going to a dermatologist. And I was like, okay, you're wasting your time because you probably just need to do a GI map and see what's going on in your gut. She went to a dermatologist. They, of course, said, we don't know what this is.
Try this topical. And it didn't do anything. We did the GI map. She cleared up what was going on in her gut, and her skin's resolved. So what's a GI map?
So GI map is, well, guess what? You get to poop in a box. There's just no way around it. So you have to give them a stool sample. And yes,
it's a little bit more scientific than that, but it's kind of like, it's more pooping in a fry tray.
oh, that's even better. Now you tied it into food. Great.
Yeah.
No, but most people, if you have done Cologuard,
it's a stool sample.
It's a stool sample.
Yeah.
So you send your stool sample in. It is, no doubt a snapshot of your stool, what was going on in your gut on that day. But what we can look at is colonies. If, for instance, most everybody who are having these skin issues, what we find is an overgrowth of strep and an overgrowth of staph. And then you start to look at other colonies that are causing issue. Oh, look, they have no Akkermansia. That's probably why they're a little resistant to weight loss. You can start to associate different colonies of bacteria to how it manifests in your health and look at, overgrowth here, not enough here, and then treat it that way.
So it's just like labs, right? You go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, let's do a CBC and let's look at your lipids and look at your blood sugar, look at your liver enzymes, look at your thyroid. and they look at it in arbitrary numbers. You should be at 15 to 30. You should be at 100 to 300. This is kind of the same thing, but they're looking at colonies of the good and bad. If you have too much bad, like strep and staph, or bacteria that cause strep throat, staph infections. I mean, you can die from staph infections. I mean,
well, we're all carriers, but it makes a difference when there's an overgrowth.
100%. So that's what I was going to say before you rudely interrupted me.
Sorry.
Bossy. Anyways, I digress. I always got to throw in a little dad humor. So again, you've got the overgrowth of the bad. You bring that down. You bring up the healthy population, just like you would in another situation. Like, oh, you have a high blood pressure issue. Let's bring it down. You have a high resting glucose situation in your blood. Let's bring that down. It's the exact same thing, but you're doing it without medication. You're doing it with supplementation and natural sources, and a lot of times just diet, cutting out the crap, getting back to fruits and vegetables, healthy meats, healthy fats. It's not a hard recipe.
Yeah.
You just have to, here's the crux of the problem. In the last 50 years, food is so monetized that you go into the grocery store and less than 1% of the grocery store is healthy, good food for you.
Yeah.
Even when you go to, I'm going to go eat more fruits and vegetables. Well, if you don't buy the organic stuff, you're basically going to get an apple or lettuce or whatever else that's been sprayed with glyphosate, which is Roundup. So that's going to get into your body, and that's going to destroy your gut microbiome. And then all of a sudden, you've got more intruders that are carcinogenic. And so it's literally eating organic,
Well, the sad thing is a lot of this is not how it is in the rest of the world.
No, exactly.
It's the United States, unfortunately, and what they are allowing for food manufacturing. And it's sad, and a lot of it is government-subsidized crops, which is ridiculous. So we digress. That could be a whole nother podcast, and we don't want to get political. But I think, probably what everybody is saying is, well, what in the world am I doing to cause, what can cause this dysbiosis or whatever? And clearly the elephant in the room is antibiotics. So if you have ever been on antibiotics in your life, then you have pretty much had an atomic bomb on your microbiome because it's no way that it can differentiate between good and bad. It wipes everything out. What we now know is that it's not as easy as one would think to just take a probiotic and all of a sudden your microbiome is back to normal. What we know is if you are not feeding those bacteria what they like, then they just basically say, well, screw you. I have to have what I need, and I'm just going to be down here making you hungry and giving you appetite so that I'm making you go back to food, and let's hope you get it right this time. And we're in this vicious cycle right now. But what you can do if you ever have been on an antibiotic, and I would say probably most everybody has had to at one point or another, sometimes we just need them. But what I would say is, make sure you need them. I think we have a little bit of sniffle and we have a little bit of congestion, and the first thing we want to do is go get on an antibiotic. Well, if it's a virus, it has nothing to do with bacteria. If you have a bacterial infection, some can be handled. Sometimes oregano can wipe that out. I mean, there is
common sense.
A lot that can be done that does not involve an antibiotic, but I think we've gotten too quick to just put everybody on antibiotics, and it's causing a lot of issues.
Well, that's why we have MRSA, which is the methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, right? So pick it up in a hospital, and it can do major damage to you. Then you have to be on the high-powered, IV drip antibiotics, and you talk about wiping everything out from there. But again, okay, so let's...
That was very random.
What?
Talking about MRSA.
Well, but that's you were saying about, getting on antibiotics. That's why we have MRSA, and that's why pharmaceutical companies are trying to create more and more powerful antibiotics, because a lot of times people get an infection and a basic I don't know much about meds, but like a Bactrim, say, won't take care of it. Like there's specialized antibiotics.
Well, we're getting to resistance now, is where we are overusing them so much. And I think everybody's heard of that. I don't think anybody really ever, it wasn't that we ever heard that, oh, be careful to go on an antibiotic, you might wipe out your microbiome.
Oh, no.
That wasn't what we were talking about. But I guarantee you now that we know what we do, it's going to be the main thing everybody's talking about as we move forward.
100%.
Okay, so what can we do then? Because we've created a lot of problems. Let's create some solutions here. What can we do to create that tropical forest of a microbiome and nurture it and keep it there? We've talked about it already. I guess you're going to probably agree that this is we've said it 5 times so far.
Eat better.
Fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Honestly, I prefer ones that have not been sprayed in pesticide. I mean, if we're talking about microbiome, you can't not talk about that without saying if it's got pesticide all over it, it's going to cause problems for your microbiome. So what does that mean? Well, the EWG creates a list. It's called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15.
What's the EWG?
So the Environmental Work Group.
Okay.
So they basically test the amount of pesticide that end up in adult and children's urine. And they create these lists based on, like what are the biggest culprits? What types of fruits and vegetables are relating to the most pesticide in their
soaking
urine.
it in and then really making
I mean,
you
it's the
absorb it.
obvious ones that you can think of, like berries. Their skin is very thin, and so they're going to soak that pesticide in, and that's why we're ingesting most of it. So they create this Dirty Dozen. The Dirty Dozen are the most pesticide-laden produce. I would start there. Make sure you're buying organic produce from the Dirty Dozen. Then they have the Clean 15. On the Clean 15 are the ones that tend to have, so imagine if a lime is growing on a tree, and maybe that tree is sprayed, but we're not really eating the lime, the outside of the lime. So things like that are on that list. Avocados are typically on that list.
So I always question this then. What about spraying on the tree that maybe leaches into the ground and gets sucked up through the roots? Does it not get into the citrus fruit that way?
What we, trust that Clean 15 because they've tested.
Okay.
And so what I think they have found is that if it's a root, so if it's on the ground, yes, it is like watermelon, potatoes. Doesn't really matter that there's a shell to it, it's still soaking in. But on trees, it tends to be a banana, if you don't eat the peel, then you don't need to buy organic bananas.
Yep.
Okay? But trust those lists, and we will put those in the show links. We will put those links in the show notes. Easy for me to say. And so we've got to make sure that we're ingesting what's going to feed that microbiome. So, a lot of people are just taking a probiotic, but you have to realize that when you take that probiotic, you got to give the bacteria what they need to eat while they're there.
Yeah.
So the other thing, too, is just making sure that the probiotic is a good brand that actually is a live culture. We had a whole talk about this on our last, so we'll just send you over to our last podcast on supplementation about the importance of a third-party testing so that you make sure that what you're buying is actually what you're ingesting and what's getting in your body. But yeah, and then you want to touch on the importance of prebiotics, postbiotics, butyrate, all of that fermentation.
I mean, that's okay. So butyrate's a short chain fatty acid that when it's broken down from the fermentation of fruits and vegetables in our system, that's what the main thing that feeds the microbiome. So again, got to keep the microbiome alive. You got to feed it with healthy organic fruits and vegetables. Another thing that we haven't mentioned yet is time of eating. If you can try to stop eating before, 8 o'clock at night, depending on when you wake up in the morning, but you need a minimum of 11 hours of a fasted state. And I'm not saying to do an intermittent fasting or not. This is just some basic research. But if you have 11 hours minimum, what it will happen is your the lining, think of your large intestine as a really thick tube, and on the inside of that tube is what's called the mucosa. Okay, that's the slippery surface, like the slipperiness of the inside of your mouth. That sloughs off while you're sleeping, and the microbiome eats that. Okay, and it makes it very healthy. Remember the chapped lips analogy? Chapped lips is dry, sticky, and just yucky. We don't want anything inside the body dry, sticky, and yucky. We want it slippery and smooth. So if you're eating a big meal and then going to bed, your microbiome in your gut is active all night long. Well, not all night long, but for 4 to 6 hours, maybe a little bit longer while you're sleeping. So you're not getting that sloughing off and the bacteria eating the sloughing off and getting good nutrition that way. So that's another thing. I mean, you gotta manage when you're eating, and you've got to get good sleep, because if you're not sleeping well and don't have good sleep behaviors, then you're not going to get that benefit from it.
And that, we talk about stress. Stress can be really hard on your microbiome as well. Honestly, our Get Better Not Older lifestyle is truly what I would recommend if you want some, shameless plug, but if you want some guidance on where to start.
You have that in your protocols, right?
Yeah, of course. One thing that I would say that I've really gotten into, and we just touched on it a few minutes ago, but the fermented foods, and you even saw it with my dinner last night. I'm really getting into fermentation of foods, because what they have found is even when people are eating fruits and vegetables and taking a probiotic, if they didn't have that fermentation, it didn't matter. And so what they are recommending is that we start to eat more fermented foods to make sure that process, because that butyrate needs to be created. And what's happening is, because we're taking acid reducers and medications that are causing issues with what should naturally happen with that fermentation in our system, they're recommending now that we include things like kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, things that are truly fermented, as an addition to helping that microbiome flourish.
Right. Okay, so we're getting close on time here. So the last couple things is, when you're a kid, get dirty. Go play in the mud. Go roll around in the grass. Have animals.
I was always so happy, because I'm not a really dirty person, but I was always so happy that our kids were in Montessori school, because they would come home filthy. And I was always like, great.
Yeah.
They were in the mud today. Awesome. Glad somebody else could watch that.
You have to be introduced to this stuff so your body knows what to do with it. A sterile microbiome is not going to do you any good. And then, of course, limit your processed food. Read ingredients. I tell a lot of patients who are trying to get more protein, because it's good to get more protein, and they're eating protein bars or they're drinking protein shakes. And one of the last ingredients in a lot of these is sucralose.
Yeah.
And it's a lab sweetener, a lab-created sweetener.
It's almost in everything.
Yeah. And
it's in bread.
And unfortunately, it creates dysbiosis. It's not good for your gut bacteria. So you want to look for sweeteners like stevia or honey or maple syrup or
monk fruit
or cane sugar that's organic, okay? Obviously, you want to limit sugar, but you really want to stay away from the aspartames. And is saccharin even allowed anymore?
I don't think so.
I don't think that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, I mean, honestly, it's really a holistic approach as well. It's getting exercise and getting outside, and it's not just this one thing. If you look at it all, it's healthy diet, sleep, stress management, getting out and being around friends, eating healthy, sleep.
It's the Get Better Not Older protocol.
Oh my gosh, that's so weird how that segued in.
We'll have a link to that in the show notes as well.
There you go. So, okay, so...
what's the takeaway?
The most important takeaway, don't eat crappy food, stay away from the sweeteners, get a little dirty, organic food.
Try not to take antibiotics if you don't have to.
And try not to eat after 7, 8 o'clock.
All right.
All right. So for Miss Shannon, the awesome dietitian, who's going to help you get better, not older from the
inside out,
I am Dr. Rob Jones, and I'm going to help you get better, not older from the outside in. So until next time, GBNO, get better, not older.